cute movie for kids. If you're a parent, Explorers. I mean, for kids that are, let's say, 8 and older. But anyway, I'm proud of The Howling, proud of my long friendship with Joe Dante, and I'm still very close friends with Rob Bottin, who's the brilliant makeup artist. Because of my friendship with Rob, I was also, a year or two later, in a movie called Legend with Ridley Scott, playing a humpbacked water witch named Meg Mucklebones. Scary. That was a very dangerous job. And I could tell that story if you want, or should I go on to other? You want to hear how I almost got killed? All right. So I get hired. Ridley Scott, who had hired Rob to do these incredible makeup creatures in this fantasy movie called Legend. He had seen The Howling. That's one of the reasons he hired Rob. So Rob pitched me to play the devil, the Tim Curry part, but thank God they used Tim Curry, who was brilliant in the movie. But the only other full-sized character of the makeup characters, all the other ones were little people. You know, either were were actors who were of small stature. The only other full-size character was the witch. So Rob wanted me to play the witch, so I auditioned for Ridley Scott. I did it full out. I went to the Beverly Hills Hotel when he was visiting California, even though they shot the movie in England. And I auditioned for him, and he stared at me when I was done, after I made these terrible faces and noise come out of my mouth, and he said, "Well then, you barely need the makeup, do you?" It was about as backhanded a compliment as I've ever had. So he hired me. I fly over there. My wife and I got married that year, so it was like 2 or 3 months before we got married, so we went on a pre-honeymoon. She came with me. We spent a week or so in England. I worked at Pinewood Studios, which is the most legendary film studio, I think, in England. When I arrived there and showed my passport, and they said, "Are you here on holiday or here to work?" I said, "I'm here to work." I was promptly detained for 4 hours because they had not secured a work permit for me. Oh. So I got a call. They called the company that I told them I was supposed to be working for. The producer gets on the phone and he says, "Why did you tell them you're here to work?" I said, "Because I'm here to work." "Well, they didn't secure a work permit for you or anything." So I literally, I guess some money changed hands, probably behind the scenes. I went back into the line and they said, "Are you here to work or on holiday?" I said, "I'm here on holiday." Then when I went to work, my name did not appear on the call sheet because I wasn't there. The part of Meg Mucklebones was very coincidentally played by an actress named Meg Mucklebones. Literally, the call sheet, it said Tom Cruise playing whatever his character's name was, me as Sarah, then it said Meg Mucklebones in the role of Meg Mucklebones. Okay, so I'm wearing this 6.5-hour rubber makeup that goes down to about my knees, and it takes 6.5 hours to get in it. The creature lives in the water. So we're on this giant set that's been built, the biggest soundstage they have. There's a steel floor with 3 feet of water, but because I'd come up out of the water, I was on a trap door that was about this big. You see how wide this table is? Imagine this was a square table. So if this was the dimensions. I'm standing on this little trap door. There's a metal pole that comes out, and then like a little pad that my butt rests against, so that I am strapped, like your seatbelt did into a car. I'm strapped to this little seat, so that when I come up, the audience, I only came up to here, so the audience doesn't see the support, but I could move around like this, because I was secured there, okay? Think about that. So then I hear Ridley Scott says, "I want an absolutely clear, surface of water, like just this mirror surface," and then he comes up, and I go to the assistant director, who's this big chubby guy who sounds like he just walked out of the Jungle Book. This is I, like that with a pit helmet on, and jolly good and everything. And I said, "I heard Mr. Scott wants me." I said, "If you take me under the water and wait for the water to stop rippling, I will be under, I guess, 5 to 10 minutes, without any oxygen, without any way to tell you if I'm in distress. Then when you push me up on the trap door, if you've lowered me, remember at 3 feet, this stage door passes a steel floor. So when you push me up, if my body recoils and I extend over this 3-foot square area, you will shear my arm off between the steel plates, or if I go back, you'll decapitate me. And this is what he said. Yes, I suppose you're right. Well, we better rehearse this then. And I started thinking, I'm not even here. My name's on the call sheet. They could kill me and bury me behind stage 17. I'm not going to do this. And I said, I'm sorry. They were so clearly had not figured out how to do this. And they were going to try it on me. And you know what? If I'd done that rehearsal, I may not be here in front of you today. And I thought, remember, this is a year or two after the Twilight Zone accident, which changed Hollywood, right? When there was the death of Vic Morrow on the set of... So we had all these new safety regulations in the United States that had not quite crossed the water yet. So I didn't do it. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go under the water. So they just did a little bubbler jet in front of me, and I came up, and it was fine. And I lived to tell you this story. Thank you. Now, for years, I protected, for years, I never told that story because I thought it didn't make the studio. I didn't want to make, Universal or Mr. Scott or whatever look bad. But then when I did the behind-the-scenes thing, and I devoted 5 hours of my time to go over and be recorded, to be on the DVD extras, and they said to me, we promise we'll send you 5 free copies of the DVD, and they never sent me one. So now my attitude is, I can pretty much say whatever I want. Yes?
Which role did you enjoy doing more, Woolsey or the Hologram?
Which role did I enjoy doing more, the Holodoctor or Woolsey? It's not a fair comparison, because Star Trek was 7 years of my life, and I loved it, and it was a very different experience working on both shows. Star Trek is quite formal in the sense that, I don't mean that we don't mess around like crazy and have fun, but it has very strict rules. You don't change a syllable on Star Trek, not a syllable without permission. If you want to fix a line, if you want to change a grammatical mistake, you have to phone it in and ask. I remember arguing when I had something that was grammatically wrong, and I would call and they say, oh, well, that's the way people talk. It's colloquial. I said, the doctor's grammar is programmed. So I usually won the case. Sometimes they were I was a biology major in college for 2 years, so sometimes they would make a science mistake that I recognized, because our science advisor, Andre Bormanis, is really a physics, his field in science is not really medical. So if something slipped by him that I noticed, I would call up and say, I have a line that says, the first cells to be attacked by the Borg nanoprobes are the patient's blood cells. And I said, that's technically incorrect, because blood is a tissue. So I said that the line should really be the first tissue to be attacked by the nanoprobes is the patient's blood. And they said, that sounds weird. And I said, well, it's correct. So an hour later they called back and said, you're right. So there would be little arguments sometimes over that kind of stuff. But the thing is, on Star Trek was so formal that you could not ad-lib. You literally could not ad-lib. If you had a great idea, that was fine as long as you had it 5 days in advance. So spontaneity on Star Trek means if you're going to be spontaneous on Thursday, you better have decided the previous Friday. And then once you had your brilliant idea, you would phone it in and say, what about this? And then you'd ask about a line or a line change or an added joke. And they were always very patient with me, because I probably had the most ideas, which is both good and bad. But they would listen and they would call, and then if they liked your line, then a rewrite came out, new pages came out, and your line was in the show. That was it. They never called and said, just write it in and tell it. No, they printed new pages, and your suggestion, if they liked it, went in. But that was a very formal way to work. On Atlantis, on Stargate, because it's set in the present, even though it's a secret government program, Atlantis is set in the present day. So they were not as afraid of colloquial speech. See, the Star Trek producers were very mindful that if they let the actors change the lines and make it feel more comfortable to them, that might make it seem more of this moment than 200 years in the future. That's why they didn't want any regional speech. They didn't want any, expressions that were popular at the moment. That's why it just didn't make sense. So, and I understand that, and I respect that that was their choice for keeping very careful control over the language. But on Atlantis, because it was set in the present, they let me ad-lib. It was great. I've never been, they actually thanked me for ad-libbing after one of the takes because they liked the line. And I thought, boy, this is a very different show from the one I came from. So Stargate was easier and more fun for me. I didn't have, the producers were great to me. I didn't have to audition to get it, and there wasn't that sense of, there was a sense that you could goof around a little bit. As long as you meant well and you came up with a good idea, you could do it right on the moment. And Star Trek, as I said, was more formal. Having said all that, I had a terrific character arc on Star Trek. It's unrivaled, I think, and maybe in all the shows, because my character started as nothing, as a blank slate, and he got to, over the course of 7 years, become basically a human being. And I think that Data's character, as wonderful as it was, because he lacked the emotion chip and all that, he could not go as far a distance as the Doctor went over the 7-year run of the show until they, of course, gave him his emotion chip on the big screen. So I think that I had one of the best roles ever written in Star Trek, which is ironic because when I took the job, I thought I had the worst role in the show. I thought it really stunk. I told my friends, I said, I got cast in the new Star Trek series. It'll be a good job. It'll run 7 years. It'll put my children through college. But I have to tell you, I have the dullest part of the show. Because I didn't know. It said colorless, humorless, a computer program of a doctor. Now, does that sound like a bucket of fun to you? I thought it was just going to be as dull as... I didn't even get it. It wasn't even until the 3rd episode, where Neelix loses his lungs, which is a very careless thing to do, by the way, that I realized what they were going to do. And, maybe it was even the 2nd episode. Because the pilot, I remember bluffing my way through. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was busy doing a play in L.A. I didn't understand Star Trek well. I'd watched my 10 episodes of The Next Generation, all the medical shows, and I went, ooh, this is good writing. I like this. But I didn't know what I was supposed to do. So I kind of faked my way through the pilot, and then in the 2nd episode, if you remember, Ket comes down to sickbay because they've asked her to get some dirt samples. She's going to start a hydroponics bay to cultivate, because, we're lost in space for 75 years, so the idea is let's try to take some pressure off the power supply and the replicators by growing some of our own food stuff on board. So she comes down and asks for dirt. And the doctor, the holographic doctor, who was designed only for emergency medical use only, and only when the ship's doctor was overworked or whatever, he's the star relief pitcher who is now forced to pitch batting practice. He has all these mundane medical and science questions that he has to deal with when he wasn't designed for that. So he basically has to get some dirt. And in complaining about that, in complaining to Tess about what he was meant to do and what he's now being asked to do, the light went on in my head. And I realized why he had the bad attitude that he was designed to be. He was designed to be, in his own mind, the absolute apotheosis of everything they know of medicine in the 23rd century, right? He knows everything. He's the combination of all these medical textbooks and the combined knowledge of 24 Starfleet physicians, including Dr. McCoy. All of this stuff is programmed in him, so he has this tremendous sense of worth and knowledge and value, and yet everybody can turn him on and off like a light switch. And he was pissed off about that. Sorry about that, kids. He was angry about that. So I suddenly got the idea of what was the attitude and what was supposed to be funny about him, that his feelings were hurt. And then when the crew aggravated that by treating him like he wasn't even there, like he was a flashlight or a tool of some kind, that really bugged him. So I figured out early on, and I also I didn't want to copy Data, but I wanted to do a physical thing with him that made him seem not quite human. So I had a very hyperextended posture, and my manner of speech early on was very kind of measured and tongue. I had a way of speaking that sounded a little artificial, so that when I became more human, the audience, I think, tracked that transition. So it turned out to be a really terrific role. I was a fool, I didn't get it. But the good news is, if I'd been a big Star Trek fan, and I understood that I had this potentially great role, I would have been nervous and I never would have gotten the job. So sometimes ignorance works for you. And nobody knows that better than this gentleman. Yes, sir, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Do you find that the Doctor was such a young character, that basically, such a young character, like being this on, had such an impact on set of the time?
I was turned on in front of Senator. That's your question. I will say that the whole character arc that I had with Jerry Ryan came out of a talk I had with our executive producer, Brandon Braga. If you remember the first 3 years, I will get your answer, by the way. The first 3 years, Kes was the Doctor's confidant. Kes was sort of his emotional mentor, if you remember. The Doctor would learn life lessons from Kes. When he had his first date with the Vidian woman, the hologram of the Vidian woman that he saves when they go to the holodeck, and he has his first kiss, and he talked about any developing interests outside of his program, he would always share with Kes. And ostensibly, the Doctor was teaching Kes how to be a medical assistant, so she was his pupil, but in many ways, she was mentoring the Doctor in his developing humanity. So I went to Brandon and I said, now that Jennifer is leaving the show, Kes is leaving, I said, I'm afraid the Doctor will go back to being just a joke again. He has no one to unburden his true self with and to share his feelings and his new lessons about extending his program. Now he'll just be a blowhard and a windbag, and we'll just have the sort of annoying side of him, but not see the sort of delicate underbelly, which I got to show with Kes. And Brandon said these exact words: think of a way that you can relate to our new character, 7 of 9. And when I saw Jerry, I thought of the way that most of us would like to relate to 7 which didn't seem appropriate because of the age difference. But I thought it would be very funny if the Doctor thought he was the best candidate to teach a former human, and now bored character, how to reclaim her humanity. That the Doctor, who's a machine, thought he was a better teacher in how to be human. That I thought was a very amusing concept, because it reflects the Doctor's incredible, his overblown sense of self-worth, right?